Jane here, and I finished the last Stay a Spell book, actually the last two in July, and so I want to do a Stay a Spell series kind of overview review.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soft spoken.
All right, so if you have no idea what the Stay a Spell books are, they start with Wolf Gone Wild, and they are 6 books that are paranormal romances. They are connected because the female in each book is part of the Savoy sisters. And in our first book, we have Evie and Matteo. And honestly, the first book in the series was my favorite, and I believe it is the only one I gave 5 stars to. So Evie and Matteo, I loved Evie because she's very nerdy, and Matteo is a sweet artist. So in that book's plot, we have Matteo has a curse on him. He is a werewolf, but he cannot shift. And so he goes to Evie, who is a witch and a hexbreaker, and he's like, I need help. Now, at this point in the series, werewolves are not well thought of, and actually Evie's sister, who's like the lead witch in the area, part of the high government, is like, I don't really want you helping a werewolf. Werewolves are dangerous. They're awful. But Evie's like, I can't not help him. So it's pretty basic. She tries to figure out how to break his hex. They fall in love. They figure out, why is he hexed? So I really enjoyed that book. I thought the characters were amazing. I had some issues with the writing in that one, and actually kind of throughout the series, the writing didn't quite work for me. I am not sure exactly what didn't work. I remember in the first book, it was a lot of like, just the way the author wrote things was not how I was used to. And in certain books, I noticed it more. I definitely noticed it in book 1. I definitely noticed it in 5 and 6. I don't recall it being something that really stood out to me in books 2, 3, 4. So take that with a grain of salt. If the writing doesn't bother you, and it might not, that may not be an issue for you, but it did kind of bother me. I will also say, and this becomes progressively more of an issue for me, the spicy scenes can get a little aggressive. Now, in this first book, it wasn't very aggressive. It was kind of what I think I said when I reviewed the book initially, on that border for me of too much, but not quite too much. Like, it didn't quite step over, but it was on there. And then later books with later people, the books just kind of keep getting spicier as we go. And to the point that I didn't actually enjoy the spicy scenes in these books overall very much. And I read a lot of books with spicy scenes, so, you know, your mileage may vary, especially if you like things that are a little more aggressive. These might work better for you than for me. The aggressive just didn't work for me, and sometimes to the point of it was kind of an ick. Actually, there was a lot of points that the smexy stuff was kind of an ick, not in the first book, but in later books. In the second book, we have Izzy and Devraj. And Izzy has a lot of phobias. She's afraid to drive. And Devraj actually hits her bicycle with his car, and that's how they meet. He is a new vampire coming to the area to be like the right-hand man of the vampire overlord, who's Ruben. And so he is a very special kind of vampire. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but he's kind of like a bounty hunter vampire. Like, he is the elite ninja, FBI, you know, he's a high level vampire that does some kind of law enforcement stuff. So anyway, it's not a great meeting with Izzy. However, Devraj has to investigate the disappearance of some girls, and they believe it is linked to the supernatural community. And so Izzy is a healer and gets drawn into this to kind of help solve some of the situations that are happening and do some healing when one of the girls is found badly injured but alive. in this book, in this whole series, I would say Izzy is the character that I thought was the least developed. I never really understood her very much, and she didn't have much personality. I didn't really bond with her at all. Devraj, it took a while, but I did find him a little more interesting by the end. I don't think this is a major spoiler, but because of his life prior to turning into a vampire, he was a vegetarian, and it was very difficult for him to learn to be a vampire. So I really did like that aspect of his story. I liked the plot of this story very much. Again, the first book, I think all in all is still my favorite. I know the first book is my favorite, and I'd say even plot-wise, it was my favorite. But this book also had a very solid plot that I enjoyed, and that's not always the case with some of the later books. But this one, loved the plot, did not care for Izzy, and just was mildly interested in Devraj. So this was probably my second to last least favorite book. The third book we have is Violet and Nico. So Violet is a psychic and Nico is a werewolf. He is Mateo's cousin. And they have decided, Violet and Nico, they've met years ago at like a holiday party and had kind of a little flirtation there. But Violet doesn't, because of psychic things, doesn't think that Nico's her person. So anyway, she's kind of has feelings but is holding him at arm's length, and he is madly in love with her, but just, given her time and space to figure out that she likes him too. They open a tattoo parlor together, and Violet starts experimenting to see if she can make ink that helps different supernatural beings better control their power. So that's kind of the plot with that book. It's a little low on the plot. I did think Nico was extremely romantic. I would say, aside from Mateo, Nico is probably my favorite hero. I did like some of the things he did for Violet and just ways that he was romantic. For me, this book was really when things got a little bit uncomfortable and crossed my lines when it came to aggression in the spicy scenes. But overall, I really did enjoy this book. I would say this is probably my third favorite of the series. So if I'm ranking them, Wolf Gone Wild is 1. This one is number 3. The next book we had was Livy and Garrett. I will say I didn't think Livy was a very well-developed character. I think she was more developed than Izzy, but less developed than anybody else. So I would say she is one of my less favorite sisters, just from a developmental point. We don't really get to know her very much. She doesn't have a lot of personality. The plot in this one is that her and Garrett have kind of been longtime rivals. I don't remember what they call her special powers, but she's an influencer. She's an influencer witch. So she does a lot of things on social media, and her and Garrett, who is a tech person, are in this contest to have a supernatural cause that they're fighting for and spread the word and fundraise for it. And whoever gets the fundraising, or whoever wins gets a prize. And I don't remember all the details of it, but they're competing in this contest, and they have a little bit of like a hate to love thing initially. I did love Garrett's background. I loved what they were fighting for. I thought that was very interesting, and I was very invested in them having a good outcome and being winners, because they end up by the end teamed up, and their cause is something that I am passionate about, just in a very different way. So I was very interested in what they were doing, but I wasn't super invested in the characters. I did like the ending. The ending was probably the first time that we get a hand wavy magic, but since it's the first time, it was a shock and awe, like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. So I did like the plot of that one. Didn't feel like either character was super developed, was just okay. The next book, which is book 5, was my least favorite in the series and my most disappointing. It was Jules and Reuben, and they were the ones I was most looking forward to. So Jules is the oldest, I think she's the oldest sister, and she's the leader of the witch coven. All the witches in the area, and she's actually like even over all the supernaturals in New Orleans. Her power, she can zap people's powers. So her job is basically, if you are a supernatural and you are acting up and acting a fool, she's going to take your powers. And she can take them like all the way to you can no longer use them ever again. So Reuben is in charge of the vampire coven. And this is a second chance romance. And I think a lot didn't work for me in this one. So we only get like a little bit of a flashback to what caused Reuben and Jules to break up, and it was stupid and I hated it. And then as they're trying to like get back together, they just both act so ridiculously. Reuben is very rich and he kind of flaunts his wealth sometimes. Jules and him both have jealousy issues. And this book was another time where at the end I felt like it was very hand wavy. The last 3 books are very hand wavy when there's a problem. Like we have the climax of the story and it's like, boop, boop, boop. Okay, this isn't an issue. And like in the 3rd book, that was the first time we'd had kind of a hand wavy magic power solves things issue that I really like was affected by. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And it was cool in book 4, not 3, book 4. But it's not cool in book 5. And I really was frustrated by it because like all this stuff happens really super quick at the end and this thing happens and they just magic their way out of it. And I was like, okay. And then we have kind of a similar situation in the last book of just hand wavy magic, everything's fine. But yeah, Jules and Reuben, I felt were very toxic for each other a lot of the time. I wasn't invested in their relationship. And I was really disappointed because throughout the rest of the series, them as side characters, I loved them and I was so excited to get to their series or to their book, and it was such a huge disappointment. I do think that they were well developed, but I felt almost like the Jules and Reuben that we see in the first 4 books did not seem to be the same people who were showing up in this book. Like their personalities were a little bit different maybe. I don't know. It didn't work for me and I didn't like it. It is my least favorite of the series. So then the final book, we have Clara and Henry. Henry's a Grimm. Clara is an aura reader. I think she's an aura reader. She is Violet's twin. And like Violet's psychic, and I think Clara is the aura reader. Clara is a ray of sunshine. Like she is the sunshine and Henry's the grumpy. So you kind of have a grumpy sunshine trope going on there. Henry reads romance novels and I really liked him a lot. He was probably my 3rd favorite of the heroes. So Mateo's my favorite, Nico's my 2nd favorite, and I think Henry's my 3rd favorite. So I really enjoyed him. I liked Clara, but at times she was kind of bossy and over the top. I had some issues with the plot, and I didn't like the craziness that happens in the 3rd act and then they just solve it with magic. But Grimm and Barrett is probably my 2nd favorite of the series. So if I'm ranking the books, I would say my top favorite is book number 1, Wolf Gone Wild. My 2nd favorite is Clara and Henry's book. My 3rd favorite is Violet and Nico's book. My 4th favorite is probably Garrett and Livy. My 5th favorite is Izzy and Devraj, and my least favorite is Jules and Reuben. Of the girls, my favorite of the sisters is Evie. My 2nd favorite is Daisy. Daisy. Did I just say Daisy? Yeah, it's not Daisy. There's no Daisy. My 2nd favorite is probably Violet, followed by Clara, followed by Livy, followed by Izzy, then Jules, then Livy. Actually, my bottom three could probably go any direction. Like the Jules up through the rest of the series I liked better than Izzy throughout the series and Livy throughout the series, but for her book, I didn't like her. Anyway, let me amend that. So my favorites for the female characters, and I'm looking at them throughout the entire series, not just their specific books, is Evie at the top, Clara next, Violet, Jules, Izzy, Livy. And then for the heroes, looking at the entire series, not just their individual books, my favorite is Mateo. My second is Nico. My third is Henry. My fourth is Garrett. My fifth is Ruben. And my sixth is Devraj. So that's kind of a ranking. Overall, I think this is a good paranormal series, especially if you don't read a lot of paranormal. I thought it was a overall good time. I enjoyed it. I loved how much connection and interconnectedness the books have. The individual books let me down a little bit, but as a whole series, I had a good time, and I'd probably give the whole series like a 4-star for series. So it's not a series that is a new favorite, but I do plan to read the next series by the author, which involves the kids of this first series. And I had a generally good time with these books. The spicy scenes didn't work for me through a lot of the books. The writing often didn't work for me. There was a lot of hand-wavy magic that solved problems, but overall, I thought the characters were fun and enduring. I liked the ideas of the plot even when they didn't necessarily feel fleshed out properly. And I think this is a very solid series, and I would overall recommend it to people wanting to, especially if you kind of want to dip your toe in paranormal and haven't found a paranormal you thought you could get into. I love the idea of paranormal, but I tend to have trouble getting into it because a lot of times you have like the guy is in a motorcycle gang or he's an FBI agent, and those are just not things I'm typically into. So this series worked really well for me trope-wise, and I think it's a really good, if you want to dip your toe into paranormal, but maybe have the same feelings I was having of, every time you look, they're very dark and the guy's a cop or like a really alpha male. These guys are very alpha males, but they're alpha in a different way than you see in a lot of the paranormals. And these books are fun and sunny and quippy, and I think they're a good time. So I do recommend them, even though my very favorite was the first book. I generally think any reader could really enjoy the first book, and then the rest of the series, not everyone may work for you. They didn't work as well as book one for me, but I still had a generally good time overall. All right, guys, have you read this series? If you've read this series, please tell me which book was your favorite and which girl was your favorite, which couple was your favorite, and which guy was your favorite, because those are probably different things. My favorite couple was Evie and Mateo, clearly. If you have recommendations of other paranormal series that feel like the Stay a Spell series, leave those in the comments below. This is the kind of paranormal romance I'm looking to read more of, even though not all these books quite hit for me. And if you have made it to the end of the video, please leave a wolf, little wolf emoji, or a dog, either one, for our paranormal shifter romance and, Mateo being a wolf and being just the awesomest. All right, guys, it's been Jane. I'll talk to you next time. Bye!